Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm here in Ngunnawal Ngambri country and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging and acknowledge that there's been thousands and thousands of years of history and care for country by those countrymen. My name is Michael Mitchell. I'm a Yamatji man from the Western Australia, Pilbara, which is Yamal on my father's side, the Mitchells, and Mulgana on my mother's side, the Blightys from Shark Bay. Beautiful country. I'm here to welcome you to Gayaa Dhuwi's next webinar instalment for 2024, Unpacking the Landscape, Social and Emotional Wellbeing, Mental Health and Suicide Prevention. Today, you will hear from Professor Helen Milroy AM, Chair of Gayaa Dhuwi, Rachel Fishlock, CEO of Gayaa Dhuwi, and Michael Cook, Director of Policy at the National Suicide Prevention Office. They will share their thoughts and insights into the cultural and historical context of social and emotional wellbeing, examining existing policies, discuss barriers to their implementation, and explore the government's role in closing the social and emotional wellbeing gap through a whole-of-government approach to suicide prevention, including the National Suicide Prevention Strategy and its alignment with the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Strategy. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Professor Helen Milroy AM, Chair of Gayaa Dhuwi. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Milroy and welcome to the GDPSA webinar for today. I'm going to briefly outline some aspects of social emotional wellbeing and hopefully maybe take a bit of a different understanding of it for you today. I'm a Palku woman from the Pilbara region in Western Australia. My country is around Marble Bar down to Nullagine, and it's a beautiful country, especially in the colder months. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on all the lands on which we're meeting today. I happen to be on the beautiful lands of Whadjuk Noongar Budja here in Boorloo in Perth, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm just going to share my screen to get the presentation started. Okay, let's get going. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our biology, the science of wellbeing, and also understanding what we mean by social and emotional wellbeing from a First Nations context. So I think we have to understand that we're all born with this kind of biological programming, and the idea is that we survive. In fact, that's part of what is in our DNA, is to make sure that we flourish in life. And so thriving is a multi-layered, multi-dimensional matrix of well-being. And when you separate them out, you start to see the different layers, the being, the doing, the knowing. But when you bring it back together, it forms this concept of social and emotional well-being. And if we think about it, what we've been able to do as Aboriginal peoples, surviving and thriving for some 60,000 to 100,000 years, our biological program in some respects has converted this way of living and this way of thriving to psychological, social, cultural, spiritual and parenting modes to promote thriving communities. When we think about wellbeing today, we often think about it as being a reductionist model, and it's been reduced to risk and protective factors. So all of these sort of negative things that can happen to you during life, maltreatment, adverse life experiences, racism, disadvantage, all those sort of negative things versus the positive things such as good physical health, appropriate developmental milestones, emotional regulation, all of those sorts of things. But from a cultural perspective, it's actually a lot more complex and interconnected than a list of risk and protective factors. So if we think about the science of wellbeing from a multidimensional model, then we can understand that music, art, dancing, singing, they all have a biological basis to improve health, mood, and emotions. Imagination and play, for example, lays the foundation for innovative and creative problem solving. Storytelling, particularly Indigenous storytelling, promotes development, creates resilience, insight, and identity, and assists in developing extensive memory systems. And this was actually really important in being able to understand life, have well-being in old age, and to also be able to survive in a landscape. And of course, ceremonies, rituals, they actually create a collective experience and assist with feeling safe wherever you are. And it helps with meaning, transition points, and is also a point of reflection for individuals as well as communities and families. So you can just see from this kind of understanding that it's much broader than things that happen to you and things that protect you. In addition, knowing country establishes health and well-being. It establishes systems of navigation and rich neural connections and associations. So you have multiple ways of understanding where you are, who you are, and how you live within the landscape. As well, being in the environment, having that ecological model helps to reduce stress and fear and gives you more pleasant feelings, as well as reducing blood pressure and heart rate. So it gives you an instant way of relaxing and feeling well once you're actually out within your own landscape. And multi-generational living also improves children's empathy, emotional and social connection, and also assists old people in their aging. So children and old people are also meant to be together. That's part of what thriving is about. So if we focus on social and emotional well-being versus educational outcomes, then we might actually find that we produce different or healthier children. For example, creativity and imagination, play in all its forms, storytelling, emotional regulation, socialization, they build the basis of social and emotional well-being and resilience in the early years. So you have to have that cultural safety, the trauma-informed approach. However, if you focus on social and emotional development, and if that's successful, then all of the learning and all of the other things will naturally follow. Unfortunately, when we look at the way we approach First Nations, we're still focusing on a deficit model, fixing what was broken, trying to reduce racism, but we're not actually improving mental health to the same degree that we would like to see. And in fact, the mental health of our children is going backwards at the moment, particularly when we see the levels of distress and presentations to our emergency departments getting more frequent, and also for younger ages. And we have issues with cultural safety and collaborative models, and bringing in ways of knowing, being, and doing within those models, as well as being able to have collaborative models with our traditional healers. We rely far too heavily on a cognitive science instead of that more broader science of well-being that we've just discussed. We have got to focus much more on our cultural ways of knowing, being, and doing in the way we approach things, including assessments and engagement and in treatments. We need to start really thinking about these decolonising approaches to actually improve our well-being. And at present, we still lack imagination and creativity in the services that we develop. So if you think about most mental health challenges or disorders, then they have their origins in childhood, sometimes in very early childhood. And although there are a multitude of risk and protective factors, as we've already seen, the adverse childhood experiences are by far the most common. And they're the sorts of things that we know about, we can do something about, we can put in more prevention, but we can also create greater resilience. So increasing the evidence base for effective interventions also needs to happen. And I think that we need to build that base from a cultural perspective, including cultural methodologies for the way we look at outcomes. The cost-benefit analysis for early intervention is also compelling. So if we get in early with our kids and our communities and our families, then we know we're going to establish wellbeing earlier on and build that lifetime of flourishing throughout the age span. And I guess one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, for each generation of distressed youth, what happened to them in their early years? What went wrong? What put them off the path of thriving? So we all, I think, have seen the social emotional well-being, and this is really how we understand social emotional well-being. It's an interconnected sense of self. It's deeply connected to our history, our spirituality, our ancestry, as well as our physical and spiritual and social and cultural health. It's our connection to land and the environment, as well as also understanding our social determinants and our political determinants as well. So it's interconnected, it's multiple dimensions, it's past, present, and future coexisting, it's strengths-based, it's about building connections and strengthening your connections. And when you do become unwell, it's about finding where those connections have been broken. It's a positive model of recovery, so it's a stay strong plan as opposed to an illness model, and it's based on our ways of knowing, being, and doing. So, connecting is not just a cognitive science, it's actually connecting through multimodal experiences, through heart, mind, body, and spirit and culture, through activities, experiences that give meaning to your life. It's about conceptual development, deep listening, sharing thoughts, a collective consciousness. It's about shared beliefs and a vision. And of course, this is also shared through our dreaming and our dreamtime stories. And in terms of establishing wellbeing early, our knowing, being, and doing has allowed us to develop comprehensive systems for wellbeing that ensured a healthy community and good survival. Our extensive kinship systems ensured safe attachment and avoidance of abandonment. In fact, you couldn't be an orphan in Aboriginal society, which was one of the wonderful things about Aboriginal culture. We carry our ancestors with us in spirit and love, and caring for others increases empathy, responsibility, and purpose. And of course, our kinship systems were all about caring for others rather than caring for self, which of course increases these sorts of aspects of life. We also know that multi-generational living, it was part of Aboriginal culture, which was healthy across the whole age span, and embedding children and young people in music, art, and languages from very early life that continued throughout life all helped to develop our brain development and our rich neural connections. And of course, our storytelling, which we use throughout life for meaning, for understanding, and for learning, helps with judgment, memory concepts, and identity. And finally, that sort of ecological framework that we have helps improve our well-being through emotional regulation, through safety, and through feeling connected when we go out bush, especially using something like a totem, which helps us to immediately identify and connect with the world around us. So parenting was very responsive. The infant was indulged and omnipotent in the first 2 years. Self-reliance increased early autonomy, and that experiential learning assisted with insight and problem solving. And of course, because we were an oral culture, we had to have extensive memory systems in order to remember everything that we were learning, which of course was also good for aging. Culture and ceremony created place, purpose, belonging, as well as reflection. And I think purpose in particular, when we think about the modern era, was a really important thing. It meant you had some purpose in life, and it was right there from birth once you were born into country. And harmony and balance encouraged an ontology of abundance and longevity. There's always going to be enough. If you look after nature, nature looks after you. And our dreaming actually gave us eternal hope. So I think if we go back to basics, we have to understand that social and emotional well-being is central to development. In fact, it's pretty much life. We have an ancient knowledge system that had come to the right way of understanding well-being through thousands and thousands of years of living within the landscape. However, a new knowledge system took over that took a lot of that away. And we are still today using techniques and assessments that are a cause for concern for our children, our young people, and our old people as well, and our elders. We need to rekindle what works, what we know works, what we have tried out for thousands of generations within this landscape. Our ancestors put us on the right path. Science has proven that what we know and what we established was good. We have so much to choose from and so much to offer. Everyone needs to understand that social and emotional well-being is really important to life and how to assist psychological recovery from that model. And if we think about it, to understand any adult, even an elder, you need to know how they were as a child, because social and emotional well-being is always going to be part of life. So building connection, families, communities, generational learning and well-being, it's good for First Nations, it's good for everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands I'm joining you from today, the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm Rachel Fishlock, and I'm a proud descendant of the Yuin Nation and the CEO of Gayaa Dhuwi Proud Spirit Australia. Gayaa Dhuwi was established in March 2020 as a national peak leadership body for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social and emotional wellbeing, mental health, and suicide prevention. As a community-controlled organisation, we are governed and controlled by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander experts and peak bodies to promote collective excellence in mental health care. We take our name from the Gayaa Dhuwi Proud Spirit Declaration, which was launched in August 2015 as a companion document to the Farawada Declaration. I'll talk about both of these documents shortly. Our members are not-for-profit Aboriginal and Torres Strait peak bodies, including the Australian Indigenous Doctors Association, the Australian Indigenous Psychologists Association, Indigenous Allied Health Australia, and the National Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organisation. Our 4 member organisations represent nearly 300 organisations and more than 2,000 individuals who collectively provide services to some 410,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. Our vision is derived from the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration and is the highest attainable standard of social and emotional well-being, mental health and suicide prevention outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. Our role as a peak body is to provide policy setting advice and undertake systemic advocacy to shape the mental health system in Australia and make it more responsive to the needs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. We represent the interest of our members in the mental health sector and contribute to the evidence base that guides the work of the sector and identifies the need of the community. We are a collective voice to change systems by centering Aboriginal and Torres Strait knowledges, cultures and practices across the mental health and social emotional well-being and suicide prevention systems. Our work is informed by Aboriginal and Torres Strait experts. We have 2 councils and 6 collaborative networks. This includes a cultural council, a clinical council, and our collaborative networks of priority cohorts, including children, lived experience, LGBTIQA+SB, stolen generations, workforce, and youth. Part of our work providing leadership in social emotional well-being and mental health and suicide prevention involves developing a range of resources for community and the mental health sector. Some of our existing resources include webinars such as this one, our newsletter, the Gayaa Dhuwi Gazette, the Good Yarn Guidelines, guided meditations, videos on self-care, and colouring in pages. Resources we're in the process of developing include podcasts, a digital library, animations, and explainer videos, masterclasses, and self-guided learning. So I might just go to some of the history of the organisation now. So in 2010, the Farawada group of Indigenous mental health leaders from Canada, the United States, Australia, Samoa and New Zealand developed the Farawada Declaration. It comprises of 5 themes on the importance of Indigenous leadership in addressing the common mental health challenges faced by Indigenous people around the world. The Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration is a companion declaration to the Farawada Declaration, developed for use by Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. In 2013, the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Leadership in Mental Health was established and developed the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration, which was published on 27 August 2015. In 2019, the Minister for Health announced the establishment of Gayaa Dhuwi and the organisation commenced in March 2020. Our work is guided by the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration, which focuses on a best of both worlds approach to social and emotional well-being. The Declaration is a call to action for Aboriginal and Torres Strait leadership across all parts of the Australian mental health system to achieve the highest attainable standard of mental health and suicide prevention outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. It was launched on the 27th of August 2015, which I just mentioned, but now we recognise that as Gayaa Dhuwi Day, and we're excited to celebrate its 10th anniversary in 2025 at our national conference. The Declaration highlights 5 themes. Firstly, Aboriginal and Torres Strait concepts of social and emotional well-being, mental health and healing should be recognised across all parts of the Australian mental health system, and in some circumstances support specialised areas. The second is Aboriginal and Torres Strait concepts of social and emotional well-being, mental health and healing combined with clinical perspectives will make the greatest contribution to the achievement of the highest attainable standard of mental health and suicide prevention outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. Third is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander values-based social emotional well-being and mental health outcome measures, in combination with clinical outcome measures, should guide the assessment of mental health and suicide prevention services and programs for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Fourth is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander presence and leadership is required across all parts of the Australian mental health system for it to adapt to and be accountable to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for the achievement of the highest attainable standard of mental health and suicide prevention outcomes. And lucky last, the fifth is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders should be supported and valued to be visible and influenced across all parts of the Australian mental health system. So I'm going to go into a bit of history around some of the national plans and agreements. So to understand the role of Gayaa, we really need to unpack the shift in the policy landscape. The social emotional well-being, mental health and suicide prevention policy landscape has changed significantly since Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration was launched. In 2017, the 5th National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Plan was released. This was the first time Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were considered a priority population in terms of mental health and suicide prevention. Action 12.3 of the plan stated that governments will improve Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander access to and experience with mental health and wellbeing services in collaboration with art shows and other service providers by recognising and promoting the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership and supporting the implementation of the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration. And for those that aren't familiar with the acronym art shows, it's Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organisations. The plan also committed all governments for the first time to work together to achieve integration in planning and service delivery at a regional level. In 2022, the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement was released, replacing what was previously the 5th National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Plan. It sets out the shared intention of the Commonwealth, state and territory governments to work in partnership to improve the mental health of all Australians, reduce the rate of suicide towards zero, and ensure the sustainability and enhance the services of the Australian mental health and suicide prevention system. It supports improved mental health and suicide prevention outcomes through collaborative efforts and funding for specific services in each state and territory. Specifically under Clause 110, it commits to implementing the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration and ensuring the work of this plan aligns with the National Agreement on Closing the Gap, the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Strategy, and the National Strategic Framework for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's mental health and social emotional wellbeing, which I'll talk about both of those shortly. The National Agreement on Closing the Gap is another key agreement that was launched in 2020. The National Agreement on Closing the Gap was built around what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people said is important to improve our lives. It includes 4 priority reforms to change the way governments work with our people, new government accountability measures, and shared monitoring and implementation arrangements. Priority Reform 1 is formal partnerships and shared decision making. Priority Reform 2 is building the community-controlled sector. Priority Reform 3 is transforming mainstream organisations, and Priority Reform 4 is shared access to data and information at a regional level. It was the first time governments and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander bodies came to set up together to share decision making and give our people a genuine say in the design and delivery of programs, policies and services that affect us. Social emotional wellbeing was highlighted as a key priority within the National Agreement, with the Social Emotional Wellbeing Policy Partnership being established with Gayaa Dhuwi as the lead peak and Professor Pat Dudgeon as co-chair. The policy partnership works to achieve Outcome 14, being that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people enjoy high levels of social emotional wellbeing against the target of significant and sustained reduction in suicide of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people towards zero. The membership consists of 10 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members and 10 government members. The policy partnership has met 4 times since March last year, and an outcome of the policy partnership is to refresh the National Strategic Framework for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's mental health and social emotional wellbeing. A working group has been established and this is chaired by Professor Pat Dudgeon. To date, there have been 2 previous iterations of the framework which have not been implemented. The SU Policy Partnership will see the development of the refreshed framework and an accompanying implementation plan. Next, I'm going to speak about the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration Framework and Implementation Plan. The Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration is the touchstone of our work to promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social emotional wellbeing, mental health and suicide prevention. Australian governments have committed to recognising and promoting the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership and supporting implementation of the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration. Gayaa Dhuwi has developed an implementation plan for the declaration which sets out a 10-year plan for its implementation. The process was overseen by an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Governance Committee and an expert advisory group. The consultation process included 3 rounds of workshops engaging over 500 stakeholders inviting submissions of the draft implementation plan. The purpose of the implementation plan is to translate the aspirational picture outlined in the declaration into tangible actions which will be delivered by a range of stakeholders. To ensure this flexible approach, the implementation plan has been structured into 3 key phases. Phase 1, identify and develop, will involve establishing the key mechanisms and partnerships to support the later phases of the framework. Phase 2, implement, will see monitoring and evaluation of key priority actions undertaken in Phase 1 and the implementation of key actions identified for Phase 2. Key actions will also be identified in Phase 3 in response to community needs and the changing policy landscape. Phase 3, finalise implementation, evaluate and future plan, will involve implementing the remaining actions identified and undertaking a comprehensive evaluation of the Gayaa Dhuwi Declaration's implementation. This phase will involve future planning to ensure the sustained implementation of the declaration. Each of these phases will be underpinned by effective governance mechanisms. This will ensure effective performance monitoring, collaboration and accountability across the life of the implementation. The implementation plan has been endorsed by the SUE Policy Partnership and the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Senior Officials Forum, and the Minister for Health and Aged Care has provided in-principle endorsement, and we look forward to launching it this year. Next, I will discuss the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Plan, which Gayaa Dhuwi has been leading the renewal of the 2013 National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Plan strategy. It has been overseen by an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Governance Committee and Steering Committee. The consultation process included inviting submissions against a discussion paper, hosting 13 roundtables with over 150 stakeholders, and inviting submissions against the draft strategy. A thematic analysis was undertaken on the outputs of this consultation process and informed the development of the renewed NAPSIS. This process identified 6 priorities built on those identified in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Evaluation Project at CPEP, the Solutions at Work report, which is leadership and self-determination, thriving communities, informed and supportive communities, culturally safe, accessible, targeted and coordinated care, responsive workforce, and evidence and data. For the NAPSIS to deliver meaningful and sustainable outcomes, 3 enabling factors are required to create the appropriate environment for the priorities and initiatives to be implemented and sustainable. These enabling factors are sustained, flexible and targeted funding, effective implementation, and governance monitoring and evaluation. The renewed NAPSIS is currently with the Commonwealth Government in the process of being finalised, with an implementation plan developed following its launch. It will set a path for all governments to work in genuine partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, organisations and communities to reduce rates of suicide and self-harm amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people by driving culturally safe and responsive solutions. You'll hear shortly from Michael Cook about the National Suicide Prevention Strategy that has been developed by the National Suicide Prevention Office, which has alignment to the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Strategy. Another key document that has been around for a very long time is the Ways Forward report. In August 2023, Gayaa Dhuwi held its first face-to-face national conference. The theme was Ways Forward, a reflection on the policy development in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social emotional wellbeing, mental health and suicide prevention. It highlighted the significance of the 1995 Ways Forward report as a milestone in Australia's mental health history, marking a pivotal moment of collective action and community engagement in shaping the future of mental health care. The release of the 1995 Ways Forward report was a landmark event that brought together the voices, experiences and expertise of individuals and communities affected by mental health issues. It represented extensive consultation with mental health consumers, carers, professionals and community organisations, establishing a framework for transforming mental health care and support in Australia. It provided a roadmap for change, focusing on the principles of recovery, consumer and carer participation, community-based care and the need for culturally responsive and inclusive services. Gayaa Dhuwi republished the 1995 Ways Forward report and launched at our national conference. It is available on our website, and if you'd like a hard copy of the document, please get in touch. Another initiative that Gayaa Dhuwi has been working on is 13 Yarn, which was developed in partnership with Lifeline Australia. 13 Yarn is the first national crisis support line for mob who are feeling overwhelmed or having difficulty coping. It offers confidential one-on-one yarning opportunities with a Lifeline Australia trained Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander crisis supporter who can provide crisis support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 13 Yarn empowers our community with the opportunity to yarn without judgment and provide a culturally safe space to speak about their needs, worries or concerns. So thank you for listening to this part of our webinar. That's all from me. So I'll hand over to Michael Cook, Director of Policy at the National Suicide Prevention Office.
Ngumbi, Gayaa Michael Cook. Hello, I'm Michael Cook, Director of Policy at the National Suicide Prevention Office, and I have the privilege of being on the lands of the Gweagal people of the Tharawal Nation today, speaking to you about the upcoming National Suicide Prevention Strategy. The National Suicide Prevention Office is a Commonwealth Government office set up to lead a whole-of-government's approach to suicide prevention, working across portfolios of government and with states and territories to address the full range of factors that contribute to suicide. The NSPO is working on a national suicide prevention strategy aimed at bringing national efforts into line with contemporary understandings of what is required to significantly reduce suicide and suicidal distress. The evidence and insights we have about suicide have matured greatly over the past 10 to 20 years. We are now well placed to act on this improved understanding by adopting an approach that is truly preventative, acting on opportunities to address key social determinants to prevent the emergence of suicidal distress in the first place, and enhances our support system to ensure it is effective at engaging people who do experience suicidal distress and meaningfully addressing the full range of factors that may be driving it, whether they be health or non-health related. The strategy seeks to provide a shared national direction by describing the essential components of an effective suicide prevention system, what good looks like, as depicted here in this model, with the contents of the strategy unpacking in detail what actions are needed to get there. Importantly, this model serves to drive a few key shifts. First, that in addition to the support system, suicide prevention needs to more genuinely encompass prevention, capitalising on our improved understanding of the common drivers of distress to take action to reduce their incidence and impact, but also going beyond this to recognise the importance of building a stronger baseline level of wellbeing, which we know significantly protects against suicidal distress. Importantly, we have approached these prevention efforts through an equity lens, focusing on opportunities to address current inequities relating to access to positive safety, health, education, economic and social outcomes. Practically, what this means is the importance of addressing core issues such as discrimination, racism and abuse, and incidents of family, domestic and sexual violence, ensuring equitable access to preventative health efforts, and better supports for people who are bereaved by suicide. It goes further to look at the importance of access to secure housing, building inclusive workplaces and equitable access to education opportunities that reduce financial and geographic barriers, building cultural connection, sense of belonging and positive cultural identity, including the role of healing and reconciliation between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous Australians, and improving the experience of people navigating key life transitions, such as for older people entering aged care, working to ensure this is a positive experience where elders are supported to maintain connections to community. This is to highlight just a few examples. The second key shift is in relation to support. Our support system must be more comprehensive and better coordinated if it is to respond effectively to the full range of factors contributing to a person's suicidal distress. Rather than reinforcing the typical structures of early intervention, more intensive and then follow-up supports, we have deliberately framed support around the essential components that must be in place in every service, every part of the support system, and evident across the support system as a whole. It goes to describing what the experience of an effective support system should entail. These elements seek to describe a support system that incorporates both formal and informal broader community roles, that is characterised by compassionate approaches that reduce barriers to early engagement with support, is accessible, providing not only a range of options through which people can reach out for help, but also reaches in to engage people proactively. That takes on the role of coordinating the range of supports available, so the person seeking assistance does not have to navigate the system alone, is able to effectively respond to the full range of factors that are contributing to a person's distress, regardless of whether they are to do with health and mental health or broader life circumstances, and goes beyond reducing distress to increasing connection to family, support networks, community and culture to help restore well-being. Third, underpinning the entire approach are four critical enablers that represent the systems level structures and processes that must be in place to sustain an effective suicide prevention approach. These enablers draw out, among other things, the importance of key reforms highlighted in the National Agreement on Closing the Gap, such as cross-government collaboration and accountability, First Nations leadership and partnership approaches, regional community-led initiatives, shared access to data to drive accurate translation of evidence, and ensuring a capable and culturally responsive workforce. The strategy cannot simply reinforce what is already happening. It must and does describe what needs to change in order to make significant progress in suicide prevention. The strategy is intended to provide a point of reflection that everyone with a role to play can use to consider what they do now and what they can do even better going forward. What I hope is apparent is that this approach draws national efforts into closer alignment with social and emotional well-being approaches. Importantly, while it's fair to say the strategy reflects more recent developments in Western understandings of well-being and suicide, it is also very much playing catch-up to social and emotional well-being approaches that have been the basis for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of being, knowing and doing for a very long time. In fact, the strategy specifically calls out this fact, highlighting the importance not only of national approaches better aligning with social and emotional wellbeing in order to improve outcomes for First Nations peoples, but also that the whole population stands to benefit from a more holistic approach to suicide prevention and wellbeing. So it's important to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership that the National Suicide Prevention Strategy humbly seeks to learn from and reinforce. The National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Strategy, being developed by Gayaa Dhuwi, Proud Spirit Australia, and the National Suicide Prevention Strategy are intended to sit alongside each other as mutually reinforcing strategies that together provide national direction. Improvements in suicide prevention in Australia cannot be achieved without significant and sustained reductions in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander suicides. Such reductions can only be achieved through Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community and cultural leadership. But accountability for improved social and emotional wellbeing outcomes cannot rest with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander run services and agencies alone. The National Suicide Prevention Strategy calls out and acts on this reality, both by reinforcing the priorities identified in the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Strategy and making clear the implications of the priority reforms under the National Agreement on Closing the Gap for all suicide prevention efforts across the country. The National Suicide Prevention Strategy has taken shape as a result of significant consultation with people with lived and living experiences of suicide, international and domestic expertise in suicide prevention and broader related social policy areas, through collaboration with each state and territory, and through detailed discussions with more than 20 Commonwealth departments and agencies, with responsibility for those factors that we know are critical to suicide prevention. A draft of the strategy is currently being considered by government, seeking endorsement for the strategy to progress to public consultation, with the aim of releasing a finalised strategy this year. The public consultation period is planned to run for 6 weeks and will be supported by a range of materials aimed at maximising awareness of the opportunity to shape this work, as well as the accessibility of options to do so. With the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Strategy and the Gayaa Dhuwi Proud Spirit Declaration Implementation Plan set to be released this year, as well as the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide due to hand down its findings by September, 2024 appears set to be a pivotal year for shifting the direction of suicide prevention's efforts in this country for the better. So I encourage everyone to engage in and help shape this important work. Thank you.